Good evening, friends. I welcome you all on the third query sessions of our 31st day GST refresher course. Good evening, friends. I welcome you all on our 31st day GST series, and this is our third query sessions. I welcome Avinash sir and Anshu sir, who is joining very soon to us for this query sessions. Avinash sir, please start the session.
Welcome, friends. I welcome on behalf of the entire team who is managing the show from the backend, and I welcome each one of you for this third query session, wherein we will be discussing all the queries which have been sent in the last week by the participants. And as I have already committed that whatever queries are left behind, we'll be touching upon all those queries. We'll be replying back to all those queries after the completion of this series. Secondly, friends, there is an announcement that from tomorrow we are about to begin a new series, which is GST case law analysis series, and we'll be starting it tomorrow. So, if the team can just show that details wherein we have finalized the timelines, we have actually got the suggestions by way of the form that they have filled, Google form. The suggestions we have received wherein many of the persons have asked for the evening timings, but our series is already on, and this series is going to be completed on, I believe, 16th of May 2020. Until that time, it was not possible for us to continue with the evening series along with this GST case law series. So what we have done is we have taken the view of all the persons, and then majority of the views were if we can do it in the morning. Now everybody was expecting that lockdown will be over on third, that is today, but somehow it has been extended, and it is expected that it is going to be further extended because the situation is not, I would say, to be very honest, the situation is not under control. It's really pathetic situation wherein I expect that this lockdown is going to be increased, is going to be extended further, and at least till 31st of May or maybe 15th of June it is going to be extended. So uh, what we have decided is that we'll be keeping the morning sessions at least till 17th. Let us see after that what happens. And then many of them have suggested that it should be in the 2 days a week. It has to be, or it can be, if possible, on Saturday, Sunday. Because if lockdown is over, we start going to our offices, or rather we start operating online, then also Saturday and Sunday is something which or the days when we can spare time. So therefore we have finalized that the entire schedule, entire this series, entire case law series will be on Saturday, Sunday. The timing that we have finalized now is 10 to 11:30. 10 to 11:30 every Saturday, Sunday we'll be having these timings. But let us see if the lockdown completes and the offices are open and we are under pressure, then it can be preponed further, like it can be 9:30 to 11, or maybe 9 to 10:30. That accordingly will take the view of all of you, and accordingly will finalize. So this was one thing which I wanted to share, that tomorrow we'll be having a introductory type of session for all the participants who are enrolled for this particular series. We'll keep an introductory that what is going to be covered, how we are going to proceed for it, and then from this Saturday, because there are few persons who have said they will not be able to join tomorrow, or there are some reasons. So what we are doing is tomorrow we are keeping a session which is going to be an introductory part wherein we can discuss about the curriculum, how we are going to cover this, and what is the target after the completion of this course, especially as per my thought process. And then from Saturday onwards we'll be having the regular sessions, and the timings will be 10 to 11:30 initially, and then let us continue this course at least for two weeks till the lockdown 17th May comes, and then thereafter we'll think how to proceed further. So this is one thing, friend. And second thing, queries I've already announced, so nothing about it. And third is, like, from tomorrow we are going to start the series of case laws from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. So we are again changing the time, because many requests we have received, and majority of the persons were asking that please reschedule this at the original time, that is 6 to 8 in spite of 5 to 7, because there are certain webinars which are of ICI. There are other reasons also. So we are now again going back to the original timing, that is 6 to 8 p.m. From tomorrow onwards, it is going to be 6 to 8 p.m. And now I would say only one thing: from tomorrow, the important sessions are there, because it is now pertaining to the appeals to the offences, penalties, arrest, prosecutions, and all those sections, compounding offences. So please be attentive and kindly attend the sessions on time. Videos, again, many requests we are receiving for the sharing of videos. We are trying to find out the ways wherein we'll give some access to the videos, at least for some time, maybe for 15 days, maybe for 1 month, or whether we can upload it on YouTube. We are working on that. We'll come back to this very soon. So this was, friends. Let me start with the today's session, which is query session. We have received lots and lots of queries, and now as I've already shared, that it is really difficult for us to maintain and to cover all those queries. So therefore, what we are trying to do is we'll be covering whatever queries are possible today, and then rest of the queries after the completion of this particular series we'll be sharing, and we'll be replying back in writing to all the participants. So I hand over to the moderating team, and they're going to start with the queries one by one. And once again, let me thank each one of you for participating in such huge number. And at the same time, I also welcome Ashu Dalmia, because Ashu will be joining in this series, in this query session with me, and he will be helping me out, because somehow, like, yesterday also I was not in a like, I was not well, and today also I have some issue pertaining to migraine. So Ashu will be joining us, and he will be adding value to whatever queries have been asked by the participants. So team, I'm handing over to you. Kindly start the question answers till Ashubai joins.
Okay. This is the, sorry, your PPT is not visible properly.
It's not visible?
Okay. No. Now it's okay. Now it's okay. Okay.
Okay.
Uh, Now I'm starting the first query. This is regarding the time and value of supply. My client in India is engaged in drop shipping business. On receipt of an order from customer in USA, he further places the order to the supplier based in China. Chinese firm ships the product directly to USA. Is my client is liable to pay GST in India? Please, sir.
Sure. See, first and foremost, what is drop shipping business? These terms I'm not aware of, to be really honest. So what I will try to do is, what I understand is, like, you received an order from US, and the supplier is from China, and therefore you have placed an order at let's say China, and then China is supplying to US. Now the question arises whether you are going to get commission, and if yes, then who is the person who is going to give commission to you? Whether the China whose product you are sending to US, or the US person who is purchasing on your behalf. In whatever situation you are into, you are getting something which, as per me, can be a commission, and which can be against the services which are an intermediary services which is being provided to you. So this is what you are doing, is you are just facilitating a supply, wherein a person in X country and a person in Y country are doing the transactions on reality. So they are moving the goods. China person is moving the goods to US, and the goods are being consumed there, and US person is enjoying it. So you are getting some commission out of it. There is a term which is intermediary services. If we go through the section which deals with place of supply, section 13 deals with it. Section 13 says, clause 8 of section 13 says that the location of the supplier in this case will become the place of supply. In this case, the supplier of service is you, and therefore your location will become place of supply, and it will not be regarded export of services. Reason being, for export of services, there are 5 conditions to be satisfied under the IGST Act. One of the conditions is the place of supply should be outside India. Now, since what I can note in your case, the place of supply is within India as per the provisions of section 13 clause 8, and therefore it will be location of supplier, and therefore it is going to be India, and hence it will be out of the definition of export of services, और जब उससे बाहर आ जाएगा तो it will be attracting the supply per se under section 7, and the GST will be leviable. This is what is the academic discussion, but so far as my view is concerned, I am of the clear view that section 13 subsection 8 is under challenge before various high courts, and this intermediary services, practically and honestly speaking, it is a export of service only, because you have not provided any service to the person in India, and the service is being consumed outside India. So in this case, certainly it has to be, although it is specifically mentioned in the law, but the law is under challenge. That provision of intermediary services is under challenge, and let us hope and let us see, because I am also of the view that this entry or this particular transaction should not attract GST, provided that section which has been challenged is read down by the honorable courts. Otherwise, yes, for the time being, if I have to give the answer as on date, then yes, you are liable to pay GST under intermediary services, section 13 subsection 8. Yeah.
The next query regarding the refund. Notification 15 by 2017 restrict refund for the person who are providing service of para 5 subsection B of schedule 2. What about the subcontractor providing service to the main contractor? Can the subcontractor get refund?
See, first and foremost, you need to appreciate that we have already discussed the refunds or exemptions or any benefits or any particular provision. If it is written, if it is specified for a particular class of person or for a particular person, then it is applicable only to that person. Now 15/2017 or 15/2017 restricts the refund of inverted duty in case wherein you are into the construction services and you have taken some advances prior to getting the completion certificate or the first occupancy. That is what is provided in 15/2017. Now the question is that you have handed over the contract to a subcontractor and he is providing that service to you. So in this case, technically speaking, the question is what about the subcontractor providing services to the main contractor? In that case also he is providing the similar kind of service, and therefore the restriction will be applicable to him. The similar kind of services is being provided by the subcontractor to the main contractor, and therefore he is also covered. It is not said that only the contractor providing services to the consumer will be not refunded. So any person who is providing that services will be restricted from getting the refund, but this cannot be the same interpretation in all the cases. अगर exemption की बात करते हैं तो अगर main contractor को मिलता है तो सब contractor को मिलेगा कि नहीं मिलेगा. अगर हम उसकी बात करते हैं जैसे SEZ supplies, so if a SEZ supplies में if I am making a supply or my contractor is making a supply, that may make a difference. So you need to keep this in mind. As per me, the same restriction will apply to the subcontractor also, and therefore the subcontractor will not be in a position to get the refund. This is the prima facie view. Although the notification is not in front of me, we'll have to read the words of the notification. If it is said any construction services provided to any person, then in that case, no, it will the refund will be blocked to a subcontractor also. But if the word contractor is given, then in that case we can interpret it differently, and therefore we can go for move for litigation and file a refund application. But prima facie, I have the clear opinion that the words used are construction services, and therefore the refund, even in case of subcontractor, should not be allowed.
Okay. The next query, sir.
Go ahead, please.
Sir, it's not. The next query is still not coming. Okay, now it's coming.
There is some speed problem.
Okay. This is again regarding the refund. Hello, Avinash sir. We have applied a refund for excess cash ledger, but we have not yet filed GSTR 3B return for financial 18-19. Can the refund be withheld for the starting the returns are not filed yet?
See,
For the stating the returns, okay.
you need to appreciate what is the provision under section 54 subsection 10, which speaks about the withholding of refunds. See, there are two processes. One is the legal withholding and the other one is that practical withholding. So if you have a excess balance in cash ledger, you have seeked refund for that. At the same time, for the another year like 18-19, you have not filed 3B return, then certainly the department officer can raise a query. He can withhold the refund and he can ask you to file the returns of 18-19 first, and then the refund can be issued, because there may arise a situation wherein there is a liability in GSTR 3B for 18-19. Because of that, you are not filing it. At the same time, you want a refund of the excess cash ledger balance which is there in your electronic cash ledger. So yes, as per me, forget about the legality. Logically also, the officer may raise a query and he can withhold the refund, asking you to please file the refund, the registration, the returns for the year 2018-19. As per me, yes, it can be done. Forget about what is written in section 5410. It can be done.
Okay, next query, sir. This is again regarding the refund of tax. In case of refund of ITC due to inverted duty structure, suppose I have accumulated ITC of rupees 5 lakhs, IGST credit rupees 1 lakh, CGST credit rupees 4 lakh, and CGST and SGST credit rupees 5 lakhs. And as per calculations, I am eligible for refund amounting to rupees 2 lakhs. How this refund will be adjusted from various credit ledgers?
Just a minute. It says, in case of a refund of ITC due to inverted duty structure, suppose I have accumulated ITC of rupees 5 lakhs, IGST 1 lakh, CGST 4 lakhs, and SGST 50,000.
50,000.
So it becomes 5 lakh 50,000. And as per calculation, I am eligible for refund amounting to 2 lakhs. How this refund will be adjusted from various credit ledger? See, first and foremost, this how practically we are or like compliance, how we are doing, how we are filing this application, I'm not aware of. So to be very honest, because I've never done any compliance work, so I'm not aware of that कि आप exactly कैसे उसको फाइल करते हो. लेकिन जो लॉ है उसके हिसाब से अगर मैं बोलूं तो आप शायद एप्लीकेशन एक साथ ही करते हो, कैलकुलेशन एक साथ करते हो. कैलकुलेशन में बाइफिकेशन नहीं होता है कि इतना CGST का रिफंड है, इतना IGST का, इतना SGST का. if some team member is there who can help me, like if Rakesh is there or Shailin is there who had filed a refund application, whether it is calculated like refund application in inverted duty, whether it is calculated on the basis of CGST separate, SGST separate, IGST separate, या एक ही एप्लीकेशन जाता है. I'll just request कि शैलीन या राकेश या प्रणव जी
सर टैक्स वाइज अलग अलग जाता है. मतलब वो ये कैलकुलेशन में देखता है जैसे कि भाई CGST में मेरा लेजर में अभी इतना बैलेंस है और मेरा इतना मैक्सिमम रिफंड एप्लीकेशन हो रहा है, तो इतना मेरा रिफंड बनेगा लोअर ऑफ द टू.
ओके, सो मीनिंग देयर बाय इट इज वॉलंटरी. आप अपनी इच्छा से कर सकते हो कि अगर मेरा CGST में 1 लाख का बैलेंस है और SGST में 50,000 का है, तो मैं 50,000 SGST में डाल सकता हूँ और 1 लाख रुपए की जगह 50,000 में इसमें लेट्स से 1 लाख रुपए का रिफंड आना है. 1.5 लाख का बैलेंस है, 1 लाख रुपए मेरा CGST में और 50,000 मेरा SGST में. आई कैन कंज्यूम द एंटायर 50,000 ऑफ SGST and 50,000 of CGST. ओके, दैट इज अलाउड.
यस सर. यस
ओके. मेरे को एक ध्यान आ रहा है कि आई हैव रेड समवेयर दैट रिफंड एप्लीकेशन में ये भी ध्यान रखना पड़ता है कि दैट यू नीड टू बाइफिकेट इक्वली. CGST और SGST में आपको इक्वल बाइफिकेट करना पड़ता है कि अगर आपका लेट से जैसे इनके ये केस में उनका रिफंड 2 लाख रुपए का बन रहा है, लेकिन उनका SGST में 50,000 है और IGST में 1 लाख है और CGST में 4 लाख है, then the refund application has to be filed wherein the SGST and CGST must be equally divided. This is I have read somewhere. I have read in some circular.
नहीं सर, इन्वर्टेड ड्यूटी का जब आता है ना तब पहले IGST मुझे लेना पड़ता है और उसके बाद फिर मैं C और S को ले सकता हूँ इक्वली.
ओके, तो इन दिस केस 1 लाख विल बी टेकन फर्स्ट. उसके बाद जो 1 लाख बचेगा उसमें 50,000 SGST और 50,000 CGST. ऐसा है?
1 लाख का मेरा रिफंड है, उसके बाद उसमें जैसे मेरा 20,000 का IGST का आ रहा है तो बाकी का जो 80 बचा वो 40-40 हो जाएगा.
दैट इज व्हाट आई एम सेइंग. मैं वही बोल रहा हूँ. है राकेश इज अवेलेबल ऑनलाइन? वो शेयर कर सकता है, वो नहीं कर पाएगा ना? ठीक है, कोई इशू नहीं है, कोई इशू नहीं है. I got the point. I got the point that you mean to say that first IGST refund. So the answer of this question can be first IGST refund of 1 lakh has to be taken. वो ले लेंगे आप, उसके आपका 2 लाख रुपए का बन रहा है, उसके बाद आप जो बचेगा अमाउंट 1 लाख हो या 2 लाख हो, जो भी वॉट एवर इज द बैलेंस अमाउंट, यू नीड टू डिवाइड इट इक्वली डिवाइड करके आप CGST और SGST में से लेंगे. करेक्ट है शलिन?
यस सर, एकदम.
ओके फाइन.
आई थिंक उसका सर्कुलर भी आया हुआ है.
हाँ, वही मैं बोल रहा हूँ कि आई हैव रेड इन सम सर्कुलर. आशु हैज जॉइंड?
नो सर.
ओके,
नो सर.
जस्ट इफ यू कैन स्पीक टू हिम, तब तक हम नेक्स्ट क्वेश्चन लेते हैं.
यस सर.
नेक्स्ट क्वेश्चन प्लीज.
Okay, next question. The next question is regarding input tax credit. A textile product is exported with the payment of tax. The ship sinks while on the way to the deliver. As GST refund is not available, we book the GST paid through ECL as an expenses. Whether ITC also needed to be reversed?
You are making an outward supply. And that to an export with the payment of tax, meaning thereby you are discharging tax on it, and that tax you will be getting as a refund. Now the question is, वो तो आपको refund मिल जाएगा, वो कोई issue नहीं है. But now the question is that you might have claimed the input tax credit also that you have paid at the time of purchase of those goods. Now that ITC whether needs to be reversed under section 17(5)(h) or not, that is the question which I feel. Abhi whether you have booked ECL as an expense, certainly अगर आपका 1 लाख रुपए का बैलेंस था, let me take an example, 1 लाख रुपए का इलेक्ट्रॉनिक क्रेडिट लेजर का बैलेंस था और एक्सपोर्ट जो आपने किया उसके सामने आपकी लायबिलिटी लेट्स से 50,000 आ रही थी, the entire amount you have debited through electronic credit ledger. So as per the provisions of the law, आपको ये पूरा रिफंड मिल जाएगा, पूरा ये 50,000 रुपीज जो भी आपने पे किया है वो पूरा आपको रिफंड मिल जाएगा. बट when I see the provisions of 17(5)(h), so whether that credit is available to me or whether that needs to be reversed is the question. So as per me, we'll have to strictly follow the provisions of the law, and since it is covered under 17(5)(h, that is goods lost stolen, तो अगर lost के definition में cover हो जाता है, then certainly आपको ये ITC को reverse करना पड़ेगा. That is my view.
Okay, sir. We are moving to the next question now. This is again regarding the refund of tax. Whether refund of accumulated input tax credit of the compensation cess arising out of purchase of coal due to inverted duty structure is allowed to the textile business when the SSC is not having any export business?
No, as per me, there is no refund allowed for compensation cess except when you are dealing in those goods or you are supplying those goods or services on which the compensation cess is applicable. So in this case, चूंकि ये टेक्सटाइल बिजनेस है और टेक्सटाइल बिजनेस में आप जो कोल परचेज करते हो उसके ऊपर जो कंपनसेशन सेस आपने भरा है उसके रिफंड की क्वेश्चन है, तो नो, द कंपनसेशन सेस ऑन द टेक्सटाइल सेगमेंट which is getting accumulated will not be refunded.
Okay. Now next question, please, sir.
Yeah.
This is regarding registrations. Do insurance surveyor and loss assessor come within the ambit of person who make taxable supply on behalf of other taxable person, whether as an agent or otherwise? That is section 24(7) of CGST Act, compulsory registration, or can they opt not to take a registration if their total turnover is less than the threshold limit?
As per me, they can take the registration depending on their threshold, and once they cross 20 lakhs, then they are supposed to take registration, because insurance surveyor and loss assessors, as per me, are working independently. They are not working on behalf of someone. So practically speaking, ये independent professionals की category में आना चाहिए, and therefore उनको जो 20 लाख का लिमिट है वो मिलना चाहिए, and therefore it is not covered under 24(7) as per me.
Okay, next question. This is regarding levy and collection of a tax. A GTA providing providing GTA service to other GTA who is also a custom house agent. Is this service exempt, or only hiring of a vehicle is exempt? Under which entry of exemption notification?
First and foremost, I am not the god of GST, so I cannot say कि कौन सी entry में exemption notification में आएगा, because we'll have to see that exemption notification. And also the additional point is that I am not into compliance, तो ये सब हम compliance करते नहीं है, तो वो भी idea नहीं है. But the question is, GTA is providing services to other GTA. How does it make any difference? I don't think it makes any difference. And so far as livability or reverse charge is concerned, so as per me, there will not be any exemption. मेरे हिसाब से इसमें exemption नहीं होना चाहिए, although we need to see the exemption notification, but prima facie I feel that this should not be exempted, and therefore it will be taxable. It is not making any difference whether a GTA is providing a service to another GTA. It hardly matters. As per me, it is taxable.
Okay. Welcome, Ashubhai. So Ashubhai has joined us.
Okay. Welcome, Ashubhai.
Welcome. Good evening to all of you.
Start the queries, please.
Okay. Okay. The next query is regarding, the next query regarding the returns. Some of the registration has been cancelled, but the final return under section 45 not filed. What is the status and its implication now? The penalties / fees is mandatory in nature. Can we file it without penalty? Asu sir.
Acha. I feel that there is no waiver for the penalty as such, and until specific waiver is given, penalty has to be paid. There is no automatic provision for waiver of penalty, what I understand. And in my understanding, there is no such waiver for late not filing the final return. As such, I in my knowledge, there is no notification for such waiver.
Correct.
Okay. Next question. Capital assets purchased in VAT era, that is set of availed, disposed of in GST era without consideration, whether Schedule 1 will be applicable for levy of GST?
As per my understanding, no. There shall not be any GST leviable if it is supplied without consideration. And the Schedule 1 will not impact this, because Schedule 1 first entry says whether the capital goods are disposed of or the assets are alienated on which the input tax credit has been availed. So it is not an input tax credit, VAT credit, and as for me, there will not be any tax liability, even in the case where it is supplied without consideration. But yes, if it is supplied with consideration, then certainly there will be a liability. This is my view. आशु भाई कुछ ऐड करना हो तो आप कर सकते हो कभी भी.
No, I'm the same, because 18.6 is also the same way when the input tax credit has been availed on the assets, and because the financial credit is not the input tax credit as per the definition given.
Okay. Now we are moving to next. This is, sir, if I am purchasing a commercial office in any market building for my business purposes, before completion certificate is obtained by the builder, and if the builder charges GST to me, then will I be able to take the credit of that GST paid? And if not, then does that constitute that I am having a works contract service done from the builder, and therefore that GST is blocked?
I feel we have to see from two different perspectives. If I straightforward read section 17 subsection 5, I think last query session that was discussed in detail, there are two restrictions. One is of the works contract service, and second is for goods and services which you are purchasing for your own property. It is not allowed. As far as the builder is concerned, builder is providing the works contract services, there is no doubt, because he is providing the material and he is providing the services. So if you go straight forward section 17.5, this is not available. But on the other hand, we have decisions of the High Court like Safari in the case of Safari, High Court has held when something is used for the business purpose, restrictions on ITC cannot be restricted on those items. So as I say, if you go state by the wordings of the law, it will not be available. If you go by the intention or the motto of the GST, it should be available. Where the court has held, it should be available. So straightforward, I will give in the two way. If you don't want to go into litigation, it is not available. If your amount is quite high and you can take risk and go for litigations, court are giving decision in favor also. Avinash bhai?
Right. I agree.
Okay. We're moving to the next question now.
I think Amish bhai, this question was dealt with in the last query session in detail. Motor vehicle ke rent ka, and this was answered by Ashu bhai only. So I think we can skip this question and move to the next question.
Yes, sir, please. Sir, your PPT is not moving.
I've already moved to the next question. Okay.
Stuck over here.
Okay, no worries. Let me read it. Interest to MSME parties for delayed payment is provided by pay. Should GST be added to it, since GST will have to be paid by MSME party? See, let me answer this question. Like, whatever is, I don't understand what is MSME making a difference, or small or micro or a large organization making a difference. There is simple provision that whenever a delayed payment is there, it has to be added as per the provisions of section 15 subsection 2 clause D, and therefore you need to add this in the value of supply. And when the value of supply is getting added, like if it is being a part of value of supply, then obviously the GST is going to be leviable, provided that goods or services which are provided are supplied and the supply is taxable supply. If it is an exempt supply, then there is no question. Otherwise, certainly it has to be added to that late payment interest, and the GST will also have to be paid by the MSME party. Next question is, can you read now, or?
Sir, I will take it further.
Okay.
School and college have a huge land and building. In the building, a bank is situated and rent is being paid to school by bank. School is also paying GST on rent. School also provides the accommodation to few employees and also charge rent, and GST is also being paid on IT. Whether school is liable to pay the GST on accommodation provided to employees, but in return 3B, only rent taxable figures is reported. Exempted receipts such as fees from students, etc. is not reported. Is it mandatory to report exempted receipts?
What I understand in 3B, I think the question is not for the taxability at all. It has been given all together here. What I understand the question is whether we have to show the exempted supply into our return or not. I think that is the question. So in my understanding in 3B, my exempted supply has to be shown separately. There is a specific column for that. It has to be shown there, so that ultimately when I am filing my 9 and 9C at the year end, figures are reconciled with my 9C and 9 and also with my financials. I think it has to be shown very well in 3B. Avinash bhai, if you want to add something.
No, I agree. Completely agree with that.
Next question, sir. If any proprietor's death happen and his business is taken over by his son in personal or in HUF category, then also section support or not, or refund of lying ITC has to be claimed?
Well, it depends. Like we have read a provision wherein it is said that if the death of proprietor happens, then there is a procedure wherein the credit can be transferred to the successor. And if the business is being continued, if the business is not being continued, then in that case nothing can happen. But if the business is being continued, then in that case जो भी continue कर रहा होगा वो अपना registration लेगा. Registration लेके then ITC 02 is the form. I think that has to be filed. And once he files that form, the credit will be transferred, and therefore thereafter the original registration of the proprietor who has expired will be cancelled. So certainly the credit can be transferred, but so far as refund is concerned, I don't think the refund can be taken. I don't think the refund can be taken by the successor. आशु कुछ ऐड करना होता है?
No, nothing. We can move forward.
Next question. If a person becomes liable to register on 1st September 2020, so within 30 days, that is till 30th October 2020, he has to apply for registration. My query is whether he should charge GST on sales occur during this 30 days period.
See, what is the thing? What is the provision there? Two provisions we have to keep in mind. Because I am going for a voluntary registration, not for the voluntary registration, I am going for the compulsory registration. So what is the provision in the compulsory registration? If I apply the registration within time, I get the registration within 30 days, then my registration is effective from the date when I applied for the registration.
Next question. Sir, is the restriction of section 18 subclause 2 is for capital goods as well, means ITC of capital goods acquired more than 1 year would not be available?
Section 18(2).
Yes,
Just a minute. Let me refer it. It says a registered person shall not be entitled to take input tax credit under subsection 1 in respect of supply of goods or services or both to him after the expiry of 1 year. Certainly, the capital goods will also be included. Input tax credit includes the credit of input services as well as capital goods. So as per my view, it will certainly be included, and you will have to maintain this period of 1 year. ये एक्चुअली उसके लिए है जहाँ पे आप अपनी कोई सीक्वेंशियल चेंज करते हो, आप कंपोजिशन से रेगुलर में आते हो, उनके लिए तो yes आशु भाई.
Yeah, you can continue. I will take the question after you have taken.
No, just ये 18(2) का था कि whether 18(2) के अंदर capital goods will be included or not. As per my view, it has to be included. मेरे ख्याल से last question the answer was incomplete, so you continue with that.
Yeah, I will take that question. Yeah, please.
मैंने वापस
So
किया है.
basically, what was one addition I will do here. The registration has been taken till 30th September 2020, 39 2020. Then the answer is my registration will be effective from 1st of September 2020 only. Number one. Number two, there is a section 31 subsection 3 where it is provided if your registration is taken within applied for within time and you got the registration, you can issue the revised invoice. So in my humble opinion, what has to be done in this case, we will once we apply for the registration within time and we get the registration, then we have to revise the our invoices for the period when we got the from the date when we got the registration, and we can charge the GST on those revised invoices, and that will be shown in the first return for the will be filing after that.
Next question. It's applicability of section 52 for e-commerce operators like IndiaMart, etc., who do not collect consideration on behalf of supplier. And what is the status if the supplier supplies exempt supplies through their portal?
Ashok, you take up this.
Yeah, I take up. I just read out what is the section 52 says for the benefit when it is applicable, basically, because I am just reading it. Notwithstanding anything contrary to the connect, any electronic operator collect an amount calculated as such. Basically, when we read the section 52, the first condition is that it should collect the amount, because the TCS is on the collection of amount. If the amount is not collected, what I feel, TCS will not be applicable. So the basic condition is not there. It doesn't matter whether it is exempted supply or not. On the amount collected, it will be 1%. If the amount is not collected, then it will not be there. Further, the 1% will be on the net value of the taxable supplies. So if something is exempted, that will not be there. So in both the situations, when it is not taxable and when the amount is not collected, what I feel is section 52 will not come into play. Avinash bhai, if you want to add something.
Correct. Nothing.
Next question. It's regarding time and value of supply. Electricity charges collected by lessor from lessee for commercial renting of immovable property. Will this amount to supply? If yes, can this be treated as composite supply, and whether concept of pure agent will apply or not to electricity charges collected?
Electricity charges collected by lessor from lessee. So can I not understand this as a part of contract wherein I have entered into a contract with my for my property to be leased out to a lessee, wherein I am saying that you will have to pay 10,000 as rent plus electricity charges plus XYZ. So when I say plus electricity charges plus XYZ, then certainly it becomes the composite supply, even if it is not a composite supply, because composite supply can be two or more supplies of goods or services or both. So there can be two or more services which are being supplied, but it is also said that two taxable supplies, that is also specified in composite supply. So what I would presume and what I believe in this question is, if you are charging something extra, saying that this is an electricity charges, and you are paying it directly to the company or to the electricity company, still I would say that this needs to be added, provided it is a part of contract that you will have to pay this much rent and plus this amount as the expenses which I am going to bear. So as per me that has to be added, और उसके ऊपर भी जीएसटी की लेविबिलिटी आनी चाहिए. बट देयर आर डिफरेंट व्यूज टू दिस. मेरे ख्याल से कुछ एक दो एआरस भी हैं इस पे, and I think Ashu can also cover, he can also add his view on this.
No, we can move. I think that I have the same with that.
Okay. Next
question. Pharmaceutical companies which provide drug samples, stockists, dealers, etc., since there is no consideration involved, does not constitute a supply, and further, as per section 17 subclause 5 clause H, says ITC shall not be allowed in respect of units which have gifted. In such a case, whether ITC with respect to gifted items needs to be reversed, please explain.
See, I think last time we have discussed, because in section 17.5, the restriction is when something is disposed by way of gift or free sample, it will fall into these two categories. What I feel ki when some samples are given to the doctors, it is not gift, because gift as such per se is not defined in the GST law, but gift is when you are giving something out of your emotions. There are some case laws also for that purpose. So that can fall into free samples. Now, and when we talk about the free samples, when we are giving free sample, why we are giving free sample? We are giving the free sample to promote our business, to promote our medicines. So if we see, read strictly 17.5H, it is covered into the definition free sample. But if you see different circulars into that way, we can it can be interplayed in different manner. Because what happens if we are supplying 10 medicine and with that you are supplying one free medicine and charging for the only 10 medicine, you are not required to reverse the things, because in that way the value is included in those 10 samples. But if you are not supplying anything other than the medicine and we are not charging at all from for those medicines to the doctors, what I feel we will squarely fall into 17.5H, and it will fall into free sample where credits will not be available. Again, that is a literal interpretation of the law, but what was the intent of the GST is what if we go the memorandum or objective clause of the GST, that is not the objective. Again, the court may take the different view for that perspective.
Agreed.
Avinash bhai.
Agreed. Absolutely agreed.
Next question. Is it legally required that invoice should be issued and signed by the designated person in the registration, by owner or authorized person only, or anyone else?
If we read the provisions along with rule, that is rule 36 sub rule 1, then certainly yes, the invoice has to be signed by the designated person or by the authorized person. The word written is as the authorized person. Now you need to understand from which perspective or for what purpose we are asking this question. If there can be two reasons of asking this. One reason can be whether the invoice which is being moved along with the goods, along with e-way bill, whether that has to be signed properly, or the invoice which I am supposed to have for the purpose of claiming input tax credit, whether it is to be signed. So for the second case, wherein the invoice for the purpose of input tax credit, whether that is to be signed or not, I would go with the updation with the amendment in the rule, wherein it is said if 5 contents are there, then you are eligible for input tax credit, and that the signature per se is not required. आपको 5 चीजें चाहिए, जीएसटी नंबर चाहिए, आपको टैक्सेबल वैल्यू चाहिए, टैक्स की अमाउंट चाहिए, all those 5 items must be there. If those are there, then the invoice per se is more than sufficient for the purpose of claiming input tax credit. But yes, for the first question, if it is with respect to the movement of goods along with the e-way bill, whether the invoice has to be signed by the authorized person or not, I would say that yes, practically, as per the requirement of the law, it has to be signed. The document has to be signed by the authorized person. Like in case of excise also, it was happening कि उसके ऊपर seal लगता था, बाकायदा जो seal का अप्रूवल या उसके एक कॉपी जो है हम डिपार्टमेंट भी सबमिट करते थे, दिस विल बी द सिग्नेचर व्हिच विल बी पुट ऑन द जीपी और द गेट पासेस. बट इन दैट दिस केस इतना रिस्ट्रिक्शन नहीं है. You can move the goods, you can supply the goods along with invoice, and the invoice has to be signed by the authorized person. That is certainly a requirement. But if you miss this, if you miss the signatures, then ना तो आईटीसी को कोई फर्क पड़ेगा और ना ही मेरे हिसाब से आपका डिटेंशन ऑफ गुड्स या कहीं पे भी कोई इंटरवेंशन ऑफ गुड्स होगा तो उसमें कोई फर्क पड़ेगा. सो as per the requirement of 36, yes, there are 17 requirements for an invoice to be a valid or a complete invoice. In that, the signature of the authorized person is there, but for the purpose of ITC, it will make no difference. And at the same time, even for the purpose of e-way bill movement or the movement of goods, it will make no difference. That is what I believe. But yes, in most of the cases, it has to be signed. That is what I would suggest, that it has to be signed by the authorized person. But अगर गलती से आप मिस कर गए तो there is no repercussion of it. That is my belief. Something to be added, please add.
No, I agree with your point, but what I feel, practically I am talking about from
I think there is some connection issue with Ashu sir.
Okay. No worries. So let us move it. We'll take up this discussion later.
Yes.
Yeah.
Next question. A is providing digital marketing service to a customer outside India. What will be the implication of GST to be paid?
No, please understand that this is first and foremost, this we have not covered. So isliye I would not like to take up this question because there are thousands of participants who are attending this, and since it is a section wise series, I will be taking up at the time when the sections are complete. But prima facie जो आपका question है वो ये है कि A is providing digital marketing service to a customer who is outside India. So what will be the implication of GST to be paid? As per me, if it is pertaining to the question or to the ऑनलाइन इंफॉर्मेशन OIDAR क्वेश्चन, दैट इज सेक्शन 14 ऑफ द IGST एक्ट, मेरे हिसाब से उसमें कोई भी लेबिलिटी नहीं आएगी क्योंकि वो कस्टमर बाहर का है. लेकिन इफ ही इज रजिस्टर्ड इन इंडिया, इन दैट केस आल्सो इट विल नॉट बी having any impact of GST in India. Rest we'll discuss in detail while discussing section 14. Yeah.
Next question. ITC on import of goods and the services, time limit and bill of entries of invoice.
I'm not getting the question. Input test on the import of goods and the service time limits and bill in invoice.
Now there
I'm not getting
section 16. Your question is not clear. Section 16 is what written.
I can tell the what is the basic provision. Basic provision, yeah. Section 16 says to take the input tax credit, there should be some document for that purpose. And Rule 36 substantiate that thing. Rule 36 provides we can have the tax invoice, we can have the debit note, we can have the ISD invoice, we can have the bill of entry for the purpose of taking the invoice. So whenever we are talking about for the purpose of goods, the bill of entry will be the document on the basis of which the input tax credit can be taken. And for the services, against, because if we are importing the services, we have to raise the invoice. On that basis we can take the credit. I think that the basic provision, I am not clear what the question is being asked here.
Correct. There is no time limit for services. Time limit, I don't understand what is that. And bill of entry is an invoice. Certainly it can be an invoice, but there are still the question needs to be clear.
Next question, where in case of car servicing, before any repairing and spare parts, firstly take the concern of customer. After that, they start work and supply of goods and services. So how we can say our intention to send the vehicle since before supply intentions are written on quotation, then work start. So please clarify on composite supply or two separate supply.
See, this we have discussed last time also in detail. There were two views. Ashuba is also discussed in very clear manner. Please appreciate one thing, that this is an interpretation issue. As per me, the example which I gave was I sent a vehicle for the purpose of service. At the time of service, they found out, they started the service. They have given a signed document with me that ये चीजें आपको service करानी है. But at the time of service, they came out with a information, or they identified that this is a spare part which is dangerous and this needs to be replaced as soon as possible. तो उन्होंने मेरे को एक call किया and they have asked me whether to change this, and I have said yes. The question which we were trying to identify there was whether the value of supply will be the determining factor for the composite supply, or it is going to be the intention. That was the question. And the Ashuba is also clearly given a view wherein there are two separate billings, like one is for services, one is for goods, and two separate rates are applicable. Both are okay. As per me, both are okay, and this has been clarified also by way of a circular by the department, wherein it is clearly said कि अगर आप दो अलग अलग एक ही इनवॉइस में अगर आप दो कॉलम्स बना देते हैं, जैसे वैट का रिजीम में भी होता था, जहां आप सर्विस का सर्विस टैक्स लगा दीजिए 18% और स्पेयर में स्पेयर्स का लगा दीजिए, चाहे 12 हो या 28 हो, वट एवर रेट इज देयर, दैट इज ऑल्सो वैलिड इनवॉइस एज पर दी सर्कुलर ऑफ द डिपार्टमेंट. लेकिन फिर भी मेरा ऐसा ही मानना है कि इंटेंशन विल प्ले अ मेजर रोल. I had sent the vehicle for the purpose of servicing, and therefore the rate of 18% shall be applicable to the entire supply as a composite supply. But if as a supplier of service you are maintaining it and you are providing two columns, services का और goods का अलग अलग, और two rates, different rates are applicable, applicable there, then that is also a valid supply. It becomes a separate supply in that case, mixed supply or a separate supply in that case. आशु भाई कुछ ऐड करना है?
Nothing. We have discussed in detail that way.
Yeah. Go ahead, Amit bhai.
Yes, sir. Next question. As per Rule 37 of CGST rules, ITC avail needs to be reversed if payment to supply is not made within 180 days from the date of invoice. Is this reversal required to be done in case of imported material where recipient of goods has not made payment to supplier within 180 days?
Basically, again, if you go strictly by the law, Rule 37 is not applicable when the something is paid on the reverse charge basis. And if we see what is the reverse charge is when the something is paid under section 93, 94 or 53 or 54. So what I feel, if we read the definition of the reverse charge under section 2, just I read out, then the taxes paid under for the import of goods will not fall for the reverse charge. But technically it will not fall for the reverse charge. I am just reading out the definition of the 298. Reverse charge means the liability to pay tax by the recipient of the supply of goods instead of supplier of such goods or services, both under subsection 93, 94, 53 or 54. That means if something is paid under section 93, 94, 53, 54, that will fall under reverse charge. And in the Rule 37, exception is given for the purpose of when the tax is paid under the reverse charge. So if we go by the definition of the reverse charge, and if we go by by the language of the Rule 37, the tax is required to be reversed. But what I feel, that is not the intention of the law, because here the tax is paid, because here the credit or the credit flow is not going to some other party. That is the purpose of section 18 for 180 days. But strictly going by the language of the section and the rule, what I feel, it is covered there. Avinash bhai, you have some other view?
No, agreed.
Next question. It's regarding charging of CGST and SGST or IGST on renting of hoardings. When a registered person in Gujarat provides renting of hoarding services to the person who is registered in other state, as hoardings are situated in Gujarat, so can we consider place of supply in Gujarat or charge CGST and SGST on rent of such holdings, or we can issue an invoice by charging IGST.
See, what I understand, the querist is trying to ask a question that he is into the hoarding services. एक hoarding है, it is fixed in Gujarat. Now the person from, let's say, Delhi is getting his advertisement on that hoarding of Gujarat. Now the question arises whether he is a registered person. If he is a registered person who is located outside the state, then in that case the place of supply will different. This question is again, as per me, is related to the nature and the place of supply, which we have not dealt, so we'll not discuss in detail. But since Ashu bhai is there, so I'll certainly take his views also, and accordingly we'll move. But मेरा view ये बहुत clear है कि अगर वो व्यक्ति registered है जो outside state में है, जो आपसे services ले रहा है, then in that case the place of supply will become the location where he is registered, where the recipient is registered, and therefore IGST का आप invoice उसको आप raise करेंगे. अब दूसरा issue ये आता है कि क्या वो hoarding immovable property में cover हो सकती है, because ये performance service में नहीं है, immovable property में cover हो सकती है. To my understanding and as per my view, the hoardings are not immovable property. So therefore, इसमें place of supply जो लगेगा वो ये लगेगा कि the location of the recipient, because he is registered, will be the place of supply. Otherwise, if he is not registered and the address is also not there, then in that case you can apply the location of supplier as the place of supply. This is my humble view. Ashu bhai can add something to this.
Yeah, bilkul, it's correct with that. We can move forward. Yes.
Okay.
Next question. GST registered partnership firm having two partners. Now one partner is retired and at the same another partner is admitted. So do I need cancel old GST registration and apply for another GST registration?
See, this question will depend how you are restructuring your form. If our old form is maintained, I don't think because what will happen if we enter one partner and one partner is retired. So I think that is a continuation of the partnership form. And as per the provisions, whenever there is a addition or some retirement partner, that has to be intimated to the department within 30 days, that the condition is there. So in my humble opinion, if as per the provisions of the other laws, we have continued the existence of the partnership form. For that purpose, if we have maintained the same PAN number and if suppose we take practical example, there are partner 1 and 2. Partner 2 has become retired and we have not entered any partnership with another firm. I think on that day, partnership form is get dissolved. Because on, let's say on 15th of January, we have the two partners, one of the partner resigns, no other partner is entered, I think partnership is dissolved. But in second situation, on 15th of January, I have entered one partner. That means on 15th of January, there are three partners. One of the partner retires. I think that is not the resolution. So it is not the question of GST per se. First, we have to see whether the partnership is get dissolved and new partnership is created, or it is a continuation of the old partnership. If it is a continuation of the old partnership, then GST number has not to be surrendered. Only the changes intimation has to be given to the department within 30 days. However, if the partnership form is dissolved and new partnership form is created as per the Partnership Act, in that case, we have to go for the new registration. Avinash bhai, if you want to add something.
No. Extensively discussed.
Next
this we have
question.
done. This we have already done.
Next question. A trader registered under existing act opts for composition levy on commencement of GST Act.
What is the question?
It's only this much is written. Next.
See, if the question is pertaining to whether he is able to get converted into the composition levy under the GST Act, then yes, he can be a composition dealer under the GST if he was registered in the existing act or the earlier law and was registered as a regular dealer. This is the question, and otherwise I will be requesting कि आप ये question को reframe करके please भेज दीजिए. We'll be addressing it.
Next question is related to ISD credit. What would happen to SGST credit with respect to common services?
Where is the difference in To my knowledge, I don't find any difference in CGST, SGST. Ashu bhai, हाँ बोलिए ना, please, you add.
नहीं बिल्कुल सही, section 19 is very clear because CGST as same state it will go in the same way. If it is another state, it will move into form of IGST only. I think that does not make any difference for that purpose.
Correct.
Next question. This query is on explanation mentioning relevant period in section 20.
Section 20. What is the explanation like?
That is that manner of distribution of credits, ISD.
अच्छा, तो ये cover करो ना.
Basically, see, you see, just we try to understand what is the concept of ISD. ISD में क्या है? ये एक पाइप है जिसमें पानी कुछ बचना नहीं है, जितना पानी आया उतना बाहर चला जाना है. सिंपल. मेरे पास अगर 1 लाख लीटर का पानी है तो 1 लाख लीटर बाहर चला जाएगा. वो किस किस को जाएगा? जिस जिसकी वजह से वो पानी आया. दैट मीन्स जिस जिसकी सर्विसेज का बिल मेरे ISD रजिस्ट्रेशन के अंदर आया है, महीने के एंड में वो क्रेडिट्स उन स्टेट्स को चला जाना चाहिए. दैट इज अ बेसिक प्रोविजन. तो रिलेवेंट पीरियड का जो मतलब है कि आपका बेसिकली इसमें प्रोविजन क्या है कि अगर आपके कॉमन सर्विसेज हैं, देखिए एक तो हो गया कि आई थिंक क्वेश्चन इज वेरी क्लियर इन दैट वे कि जहां पर मेरी स्पेसिफिक सर्विसेज है वो मैं स्पेसिफिक वे में उनको ट्रांसफर कर दूंगा. जहां पर कॉमन सर्विसेज हैं, जहां पर मैं बाइफरकेट नहीं कर सकता कि किस स्टेट का कितना है, तो वो टर्नओवर के बेसिस पर लिया जाएगा. तो टर्नओवर के बेसिस पर लेने के लिए जो एक्सप्लेनेशन है उसमें उन्होंने बताया हुआ है कि आपको जो फाइनेंशियल ईयर है, पिछले जो फाइनेंशियल ईयर है, जो रिसिपेंट, मान लीजिए 4 रिसिपेंट हैं, चारों रिसिपेंट का पिछले साल भी फाइनेंशियल टर्नओवर था, तो हम वो टर्नओवर ले लेंगे. और अगर पिछले साल में टर्नओवर नहीं था तो हम लास्ट क्वार्टर का टर्नओवर ले लेंगे. दैट मींस बेसिकली जो हमें क्रेडिट डिस्ट्रीब्यूट करना है कॉमन सर्विसेज का, दैट विल बी बेस्ड ऑन द टर्नओवर ऑफ द रिसिपिएंट ऑफ द स्टेट्स. वो टर्नओवर जो है रिलेवेंट पीरियड का यहाँ पर मतलब है कि पिछले फाइनेंशियल ईयर में अगर सबका क्रेडिट टर्नओवर था तो सबका ले लेंगे, और अगर सबका टर्नओवर पिछले फाइनेंशियल ईयर में नहीं था तो पिछले क्वार्टर का टर्नओवर हम सारे उन स्टेट्स का ले लेंगे फॉर द पर्पस ऑफ डिस्ट्रीब्यूटिंग द क्रेडिट.
Next question. A builder has opt under composition, 5% tax is to be paid.
I don't find any provision for composition availability, like scheme availability to the builder. It's not there. अभी जो नया स्कीम है, नया स्कीम में ये है कि 5% is for everyone. It is not under composition. So as per me, the builder cannot opt for the composition levy, if that is the question, because the question seems to be incomplete. If that is the question, then no, the builder cannot opt for the composition levy.
Next, gift given to employee or dealer by company for target achievement, can it be considered while taking ITC on those goods?
See, again, I will just read section 17, subsection 5, clause H. Anything which is given, disposed by way of gift or way of free sample, ITC has to be reversed. Now, when I am giving to employee something because he achieved the target, is it gift? I feel it is not the gift.
Correct.
It is business expense where you are giving to the employees because he achieved something. Gift, something is given, what I feel, I don't remember the case law, where it's defined with when you are giving out of emotion something. Gift is, I have fixed, if you achieve so much of target, I will give you something. That is in the form of incentive. And when it is incentive, it is not free sample, it is not free gift. I think 17(5)(h) should not come in between for such gifts. It will not be gift, it will be incentive to the employees, what I will say. Avinash bhai?
Agreed. Gift is something which is voluntary, like against which there is no obligation. In this case, there was an obligation for target achievement, and therefore it is not a gift. Yeah.
Next question. Whether supplies made as pure agent are exempt supply or non-GST supply or no supply, and whether such supply would be considered for calculating aggregate turnover purpose. If yes, then how, as the transaction value of supplies under pure agent is nil. If I am right, please guide.
See, what I feel is pure agent is a concept under GST. Pure agent का मतलब ये हुआ कि आप किसी के बिहाफ पे कोई सप्लाईज कर रहे हैं और उससे उतना ही कलेक्ट करके यू आर मीटिंग आउट सर्टेन कंडीशन से, इट इज नॉट अ क्लासिफिकेशन, इट इज मीटिंग आउट सर्टेन कंडीशंस which are specified in the law as per my view. And once you are able to meet those conditions, the value of supply will become nil. If you are not able to maintain those conditions or satisfy those conditions, then it will squarely fall into the definition of into the supply. So as per me, it is a supply, it is not exempt supply or non GST supply, it is a supply, but the value of that supply is to be taken as nil because it is falling into the purview of pure agency, and certainly it is going to be the part of aggregate turnover. Now if the value is nil, then it will make no difference, but if you are not in a position to satisfy the conditions which are laid down in that particular provision, then in that case it will come out of the pure agent definition, and therefore it has to be added in the value of supply, also, and the definition of aggregate turnover also. This is my humble view. Maybe Ashu bhai may have some different view.
No, it's the same view. No, because Rule 33 is very clear. It is a taxable supply with zero value.
Correct.
Practically, when we add into aggregate turnover, it has no impact. But technically, it is a part of aggregate turnover.
Next question. Please state your views on the taxability of mobilization of advances with reference to the case law of Siemens Limited, that is AAR West Bengal.
Basically, I tell you, in Siemens, what happened, the contract was with Kolkata Metro, and that contract was, I think, happened in 2011 or 12, and that was exempted per se in the service tax. And because of the exemption of the service tax, there was no tax paid on those advances at that point of time. Because that is very practical case, we cannot apply for every transaction here. That's why I'm giving the background for that purpose. So what happened, Siemens, when we took the mobilization advance in 2011, what I remember, there was no service tax on that purpose. In 2017, major portion of that advance, mobilization advance, was outstanding. So the question before the authority came, when mobilization advance was taken in 2011, is outstanding on 1st of July 2017, whether that will be taxable or not, that was the question. The ruling of the authority was it will be taxable on 1st of July 2017. But I am not agreeing with the other advance ruling authority, because what is the provision in the law? Provision in the law is, if you go to the section 13, the taxability arises either at the time of taking the advance or at the time of raising the invoice. In advance ruling authority, they provided deeming fiction. What they provided the deeming fiction on 1st of July 2017, whatever the mobilization advance was outstanding, they deemed it has been received on 1st of July 2017. And what I understand, if something is not provided explicitly in the law, cannot be made taxable. Section 13 is very clear for the time of supply of services, either at the time of advance or at the time of receipt of services, whichever is earlier. When I have received the advance in pre-GST regime, that cannot be treated as an advance in the GST regime. So as far as this advance ruling is concerned, though with respect to the Honorable AR, though all are against SSEs, they have deemed, they have taken the deeming fiction as on 1st of July 2017. What was the advance carried forward from the previous GST regime? They assumed that they have taken in 1st of July 2017, and on that basis, they told that it will be taxable in GST regime on 1st of July 2017 itself. That was the advance ruling. So from that perspective, I have dealt with when we are carrying forward the mobilization advance, authority held it will be taxable, but in my humble opinion, it is not provided in the law itself. And if you go by the article 265 also, if something is not provided in the law, cannot be made taxable. That is the one point. Second point, if we cover it with the mobilization advance as of now in the GST regime, either we take the mobilization advance or we take the normal advance, for the purpose of GST as per section 13 will not make any difference. The difference will only come when we have something taken as a deposit. If something is in the character of deposit, the taxability of that deposit will not arise. But if we take advance either in the form of mobilization advance or a normal advance, the taxability into the GST regime will arise, and that will nothing to do with the AR because of the Siemens, because that AR is for carrying forward of advances from the previous GST regime. Avinash bhai?
Then correct, I agree. And plus, I have already said openly in the open forum that I don't rely and I don't read any advance rulings. So,
but departments will go by those advance rulings. That is a challenge.
That is the
they will not
most
take the name, but the logic they will take from those ARs. That is going to happen.
That is the most unfortunate thing that we'll have to face. But
yes.
Somehow the advance rulings are absurd. They are not even applying their mind while giving those rulings. And the another logic which that I have shared, because yesterday only we have done this session. Yesterday my throat was not well, but I have covered that. कल ही हम लोगों ने ये भी डिस्कस किया, या मैंने अपना एक व्यू रखा कि व्हाई दे आर मेकिंग द एडवांस रूलिंग्स पब्लिक, व्हाट इज द पॉइंट इन मेकिंग इट पब्लिक. ये तो ऐसा हो गया जैसे आप किसी कमिश्नर के ऑर्डर को पब्लिक कर देते हैं और फिर लोग दूसरे स्टेट वाले भी उसको फॉलो करने लग जाते हैं. देयर इज नो पॉइंट इन मेकिंग इट पब्लिक व्हेन इट इज नॉट बाइंडिंग टू द पब्लिक. व्हाई यू आर मेकिंग इट पब्लिक? सर्विस टैक्स और एक्साइज के रिजीम में भी इट वाज देयर ऑन द पोर्टल बट इट वाज नेवर मेड पब्लिक. अभी तो घूम रहा है बिंदास. एनीवेज, लेट अस प्रोसीड.
यस.
Next question. It's regarding section 18. If I'm supplying exempt goods and not registered, and if it becomes taxable, then I shall fall under section 18 subclause 1 clause A and not under section 18 subclause 1 clause D, since clause D covers registered person only.
This is very specific question, so let me refer section 18(1) because ऐसा नहीं होता, ये लॉ ऐसा हो गया कि इसमें सब चीजें याद नहीं रहती है. Clause D says where an exempt supply of goods or services or both by a registered person becomes a taxable supply. Certainly, yes, it will not fall into the clause D, it will fall into clause A only, because if you are registered and making an exempt supply and which becomes taxable later is covered under 18(1)D, otherwise it will be into 18(1)A only. I agree with this.
Next question. Is it mandatory to go for ISD concept for distribution of common credits? Can we ask the supplier to raise separate invoice on each of the units under same legal entity by splitting the consideration or by entering into separate agreement with each of the units so that ISD distribution can be avoided?
See, basically there are two things what we have to understand. GST will come when as per our operational requirements. If I am not making the centralized contracts, I am not making the invoice centrally, there is no requirement of ISD. But if I am doing the contract centrally and I am see what happens, I take practical example. I have a head office in Delhi and I have 3 branches. I have 1 branch in Surat, 1 branch in Delhi, 1 branch in, let's say, Bombay. I am making a central contract. I am making a central contract for providing the security with agency in Delhi, and I ask to provide the securities at different places. And I will make the payment from the central office to the security agency. Now the question arises, the way you are saying the splitting the invoices, is it possible? I will say no. Reason being, the definition of the recipient in GST law is very clear. The person who is liable to pay the consideration will be the recipient. That means the security agencies will have to compulsorily issue the invoices to the central office only. In that case, you have to take the invoices at the central level, you have to distribute the credits, and in that case, you have to go for the registration and distribution of the credits as per the provisions of section 19 and 20 of the CGST Act. So in that scenario, it is not possible. But let's say another example where I don't make any centralized agreement, where the branches itself make the agreements with the separate part with the security agencies. Maybe master agreements may be there, but the individual agreements are done by the respective branches. In that case, for the security agencies, the recipient becomes those branches and they will raise directly invoices to those branches. ISD question will not arise. So what is my take here? You cannot tweak the half concepts. That means आधा तो अप्लाई कर दिया कि मैं कॉन्ट्रैक्ट सेंट्रलाइज करूंगा लेकिन डिस्ट्रीब्यूशन नहीं करूंगा. इट इज नॉट पॉसिबल. Either you go fully, that means आप सेंट्रलाइज कॉन्ट्रैक्ट मत करिए, ब्रांचेस के साथ कॉन्ट्रैक्ट करिए, देयर विल बी नो क्वेश्चन ऑफ द आईएसडी रजिस्ट्रेशन. लेकिन जहां पर मेरा सेंट्रलाइज कॉन्ट्रैक्ट है, सेंट्रलाइज पेमेंट्स हैं, जहां पर सेंट्रल ऑफिस ही रिस्पांसिबल है फॉर मेकिंग द एग्रीमेंट्स, फॉर मेकिंग ऑल अरेंजमेंट्स, then the way you are telling is not practically possible. you will fall into compulsory registration of ISD. You have to comply with section 19 and 20 of the CGST Act. Avinash bhai.
Correct. Even in case of like audit bill का भी bill आएगा,
Yes.
सारी branches का एक ही आएगा ना.
Basically, ultimately, we have to recognize who is the recipient of the supply. Supplier को देखना पड़ेगा ना, who is the recipient.
Correct.
Next question. I want to know that in case of real estate developers, consideration received against sale of flats or shops received after obtaining completion certificate from local authority is considered as exempt supply or not?
It is falling in the schedule 3 now, and when it falls into schedule 3, then it will be neither a supply of goods nor supply of services, meaning thereby it will fall within the four corners of no supply, and it will neither be an exempt supply nor the non-taxable supply. It will become a no supply. Now another issue, या यहीं से निकल के एक क्वेश्चन और दिमाग में आता है, that non-GST supply, whether it will include non-GST supply or non-taxable supply. Non-taxable supply includes the tax on which the supplies on which the tax is not leviable. So first and foremost, you need to determine whether it is supply or not. To my view, यहाँ तो ये क्वेश्चन का आंसर बहुत क्लियर है कि अगर आपका पूरा बाद में आया कलेक्शन या completion certificate के बाद में, तो it is no supply. It is neither supply of goods nor supply of services. So वो बहुत clear है, but whether it is to be included in the aggregate turnover or not, that is another question which can come out of it. कि अगर मेरा वो non taxable supply है because इस पे GST levy नहीं होता, but first and foremost you need to identify whether it will fall into non taxable supply and therefore it will be added into the value of aggregate turnover or not. So अगर मेरी आप बात करो तो जो schedule 3 की supplies हैं, वो supplies ऐड ही नहीं होंगे एग्रीगेट टर्नओवर में. दिस इज माय व्यू, बट आई हैव कम अक्रॉस द कंट्री व्यूज आल्सो, एंड आई विल बी रिक्वेस्टिंग आशु भाई आल्सो टू ऐड हिज व्यू कि अगर ऐसा सिचुएशन है तो वेदर वी शुड ऐड दिस इन एग्रीगेट टर्नओवर फॉर द पर्पस ऑफ कैलकुलेटिंग द थ्रेशोल्ड एंड द अदर कैलकुलेशंस लाइक टर्नओवर लिमिट्स फॉर द पर्पस ऑफ ऑडिट एंड ऑल. एग्रीगेट टर्नओवर में इंक्लूड करेंगे कि नहीं करेंगे?
उसके लिए जस्ट मैं एक बार ना एग्जम्प्टेड सप्लाई की डेफिनेशन को जस्ट आई रीड आउट.
यस.
बेसिकली एग्जम्प्टेड और नॉन टैक्सेबल सप्लाई की हम एक बार डेफिनेशन को देखते हैं. एग्जम्प्टेड सप्लाई मींस सप्लाई ऑफ गुड्स और सर्विसेज ऑन व्हिच अट्रैक्ट्स नील ऑफ टैक्स एंड इंक्लूड्स नॉन टैक्सेबल सप्लाई. अब हम नॉन टैक्सेबल सप्लाई डेफिनेशन में आते हैं. नॉन टैक्सेबल सप्लाई मींस सप्लाई ऑफ गुड्स और सर्विसेज व्हिच इज नॉट एबल टू टैक्स अंडर दिस एक्ट एंड गुड्स. मतलब देखिए अगर दोनों ही डेफिनेशन में जाएं, पहले मैं एग्जम्प्टेड सप्लाई की डेफिनेशन में जाऊं तो उसमें नॉन टैक्सेबल सप्लाई है. नॉन टैक्सेबल सप्लाई में कह रहा है सप्लाई ऑफ गुड्स एंड सर्विसेज. दैट मींस प्रेसिडेंट कंडीशन इज कि देयर शुड बी सप्लाई ऑफ गुड्स एंड सर्विसेज. सो व्हेन समथिंग इज प्रोवाइडेड इन शेड्यूल 3, दैट इज सप्लाई ऑफ गुड्स, neither supply of services. In my understanding also, if something is covered into schedule 3, that is neither supply, no taxable supply, no supply as such. So that will not be part of the turnover, in my humble opinion.
Correct.
Next question. Auto component companies normally have to send certain parts to external testing agencies, which normally destructed during testing purpose. Test results are shared with auto component company. Testing results are useful during further manufacturing process. Both auto component company and testing agency is in India. Is it required to reverse ITC in case of such parts sent to testing agency which got destructed during testing?
I don't feel that is a requirement of section 17.5 at all, because 17.5 is lost or destroyed. It is not lost or destroyed. It is basically consumed. Basically, there are three words, technically what I feel. The first word is whether it is lost. No, it is not lost. It is destroyed. It is not destroyed. Basically, it is consumed during the process. If something is consumed during the process, then I think there is no bar to take ITC on that. In that way, what will happen otherwise? I am taking 100 kilogram of input, I am getting 10 kilogram of output. The 90 kilogram I have to reverse. I feel if it is a part of my manufacturing process, if it is my part of my testing process, and if something is consumed in duration, that ITC has not to be reversed. What I understand, my understanding. Avinash bhai.
100% I agree with this, because this is a process loss.
Next question. As per section 15 subclause 1 says that value of supply would be transaction value provided price is the sole consideration and parties are not related. What would the scenario in case of distinct persons? Legally, both related and distinct persons have been defined separately in the law, and related person does not include distinct persons. Does it mean that in case of distinct persons, if price is the sole consideration, we need not refer valuation rules?
See, again, I would say, like apparently what I feel is they have given under section 15. Let us refer this. Give me 1 minute. Let us refer this provision. There are two terms which you have mentioned, related and the section 15. See, under section 15, in explanation, the term is person shall be deemed to be related persons. Now, when the person will be deemed to be related person, and if we read section 15 subsection 1, it says the value of supply of goods or services or both shall be the transaction value, which is the price actually paid or payable for the said supply of goods or services or both, where the supplier and the recipient of the supply are not related. Now, so far as distinct person is concerned, distinct person is a person who is having same PAN number. That is the only difference. And when I read this related person, I agree with you that there is no mention about the distinct person, because distinct person is an artificial creation of this law. सेक्शन 25 ने उनको क्रिएट किया है कि आप जब आपके पास एक ही पैन नंबर होगा, since this is a state based levy, you will have to take registration in each state from where you are making an outward supply. That is a creature or creation of this particular statute, wherein a single person has been divided into 24, 27, 29, or whatever states are there from where he is making a supply. Now the question is whether distinct person or related person can be equated, and in case it is a matter of distinct person, जहाँ पे मैं अपनी branch को अगर supply कर रहा हूँ, so whether the valuation rules will be applicable, whether it will be treated as related person or not. To my understanding, I would say अभी तक जो हम लोग सोच रहे थे, because this is a good question, we have not applied my mind in this particular what I can say, इस पर्टिकुलर डायरेक्शन में कभी सोचा नहीं, बट मेरा अंडरस्टैंडिंग ये है कि अगर लीगली मैं पढ़ता हूँ दैट डिस्टिंक्ट पर्सन इज सर्टेनली नॉट अ रिलेटेड पर्सन, ही इज सर्टेनली नॉट अ रिलेटेड पर्सन. बट अगर मैं रूल 28 देखता हूँ, लेट अस गो टू रूल 28 आल्सो, because this is an interesting thing. I have never thought of this, so I'm really thankful to the querist. Just a minute. Rule 28 says value of supply of goods or services or both between the distinct or the related person. So rule 28 is applicable in case of distinct person or the related person. Now your question is कि अगर मैं distinct person को supply करता हूँ, तो whether he will be involved in the definition of related persons or not. To my understanding, it will be included in the definition of related persons, and therefore valuation rule will be made applicable to you. This is my understanding. Let Ashu bhai add into this, and let me read 15 that explanation once again. Ashu bhai अगर कुछ add करना चाहते हैं, because अगर clause 1 में specifically covered नहीं करता है वो, specifically I agree that distinct person is not covered. Why it will be covered? Because मैंने जैसे बोला कि ये तो artificial creation है इस law का, तो distinct person नहीं होगा. लेकिन अगर let's say A Limited गुजरात and A Limited दिल्ली है, तो A Limited में directors तो common है, so by default it becomes a related person. That is what I presume and I believe. Let us listen to Ashu bhai also, what opinion he has. Ashu bhai आप add करो ना इसमें. मेरे हिसाब से वो related person ही है, distinct person भी.
Avinash bhai?
हाँ, yes.
Just go to section 15 subsection 5.
हाँ.
Where it is rule 28 is notified under rule 555, and distinct person will be squarely has to be valued under rule 28.
Correct.
Because it is overriding section 15 subsection 1.
Correct,
Yeah.
correct, correct. So as per you also, the distinct person is a related person, no? Valuation में जाना ही पड़ेगा उसके लिए.
Yes, उसको valuation में जाना ही पड़ेगा, because
Correct. That
section
is the same.
15 subsection 5 notwithstanding to subsection 1 or to 4.
Right. That is the same view I have given, but you have given the exact provision also, that the provision that also will add or substantiate my view. ठीक है. Let us move to next question.
Next question. The supplier arranged for the annual customer meets. He arranged the stay arrangement for all the customers and staff in a resort at a hill station away from his registered place city. Trainers were also invited to the customer meeting for giving product specific training to the customer. Queries: can the supplier avail ITC credit for GST on stay expenses of customers, guests and staff? Can the supplier avail ITC credit of the trainer services?
Ashok bhai, are you there?
Hello. Yeah, my voice is coming.
हाँ आ रही है,
Yes,
आ रही है, बिल्कुल, it's clear.
Hello.
Yeah, it's clear.
My voice
Please
is coming.
go ahead. हाँ, yes, yes.
I
You are
think
audible,
there's
Ashok bhai.
Ashu
Acha.
sir, there is some problem with Ashu sir's system. So you can take this
Okay, no
query, sir.
problem. Yeah, no problem. The supplier arranged for the annual customer meet. He arranged the stay arrangement of all the customers and staff in a resort at a hill station. Trainers also invited to the customer meeting for giving product specific training to the customers. Now, can this supplier avail ITC for GST on stay expenses of customers, guests and staff? And second is, can the supplier avail ITC on the training services? Now please appreciate one thing, that जहाँ पे भी रिस्ट्रिक्शन दिया हुआ है ITC का, वो रिस्ट्रिक्शन को अपनी यहाँ से एक बार भूल जाते हैं और इतना ध्यान रखते हैं कि अगर मेरे बिजनेस प्रमोशन में इफ आई हैव गिवन एन ऑप्शन टू ऑल माय कस्टमर्स कि अगर आप 1000 commodities परचेज करेंगे इन ईयर, then we'll have a meeting and all those persons who cross that 1000 numbers will be called for that annual customer meeting and will also have a award function for that. So again I will say that मेरा belief ये है कि it is expenditure which is for the promotion of business or motivating the customers. So उस केस में मिलना चाहिए. अगर यहाँ पे एक डिफरेंस और मुझे लग रहा है, because the word used is customer. You are arranging a customer meet. If it is for the purpose of like your business promotion, तो फिर मैं ये बोलूँगा कि मिलना चाहिए ये एक्सपेंस. लेकिन लीगल अगर हम जाते हैं, लीगल वर्बैटिम वाइज जाते हैं और इंटेंशन को साइड में छोड़ देते हैं, तो देयर कैन बी अ रिस्ट्रिक्शन वेयर इन जब हम 16(1) को पढ़ते हैं तो 16(1) बोलता है कि वही आईटीसी आपको मिल सकती है जो आईटीसी या जो प्रोडक्ट्स या जो इनपुट सर्विसेज आप यूटिलाइज कर रहे हैं या अपने बिजनेस और प्रोफेशन के फर्दरेंस के लिए आप इंटेंशन है आपका यूज करने के लिए. सो कीपिंग दैट इन माइंड and overriding everything, just giving my view, my humble view is that if it is related to my business promotion, अगर मैं ऐसे ही ले जाके उनको पार्टी करा देता हूँ, that is a different thing. But अगर मैं उनको बुला के उनके ट्रेनिंग भी कराता हूँ कस्टमर्स की और मैं उनको ये इस तरीके का एक बेनिफिट देता हूँ which I have announced officially that this will be a benefit which will be given to all the customers, then I believe that this is business promotion expenses and therefore the credit should be allowed. Is Ashu bhai back? Then he can add something if you want to add.
No, Ashu sir is not here right now.
No worries. No worries. No worries. Just a minute. Yeah. Next question.
Search conducted by
Yeah. Please.
search conducted by DGGI on dealer premises and they have seized the documents. Now they compelled the dealer to pay the tax without giving the show cause notice under section 73 or section 74. Can they do so?
No, absolutely not. They cannot do that. They cannot compel a dealer without giving a show cause notice to make the payment, because unless they determine the amount, they cannot make me compel or they cannot make the person who is registered person or unregistered person but liable to be registered. He cannot compel for the payments. There are many case laws also in this favor, wherein it has been decided that unless it is determined, unless the amount is determined, the recovery proceedings cannot be initiated. And I think at the time of discussion of these provisions also, while discussing section 79, while discussing section 67, I will specifically mentioned this point कि अगर आपके वहाँ सर्च के लिए आ रहा है और वो उसी मोमेंट पे बोलता है कि नहीं आपको पूरा पैसा भरना पड़ेगा, then he cannot do that, because the recovery can be of amount payable, and the amount payable cannot be said to be amount payable unless it is determined by the way of proper adjudication. So मेरे हिसाब से नहीं कर सकता, लेकिन अगर मैं practically बोलूँ, they are doing it very openly, and out of coercion या out of fear या out of anxiety, the taxpayers are paying it also. And let me accept one thing: if voluntarily you are paying, whether it is under protest or not, without or not under protest, you can pay. There is no problem in that. But if you don't want to pay, then they cannot compel you to pay. That is the point which I'm trying to mention here. Yeah.
Yavanasha, my connection is weak today. It's lost.
No problem. Take up the next question.
Next question. Can the department directly proceed for cancellation of registration under Rule 22 without issuing notice under Section 46 and consequent assessment under Section 62?
No, that is not the situation, because I think Section 16(2) is very clear. Unless until the notice under Section 46 is given, we cannot go for Section 62, because 62 is the follow-up of the Section 46. I think that is not possible at all. If we go by language itself, it is very clear. I just read out the language of Section 62. I am reading the 2-3 lines. Notwithstanding anything contained to the contrary in Section 73, 74, where a registered person fails to furnish the return under Section 39, 35, 45, even after the service of notice under Section 46. That means Section 62 is very clear. The last action by the department before going for Section 62 is the issuance of notice under Section 46. Though they may not issue the notice under Section 62, but they can do only after a notice under Section 46, where the 15 days time the return is given. And I think they have given the SOP for that purpose also. Some SOP came for that purpose. But law is very clear: without Section 46, these assessments or Section 62 assessment cannot be done.
Next question. In case of best judgment, subsection 2 of Section 62 mention if valid return filed within 30 days of order, then order withdrawn. Since me, SSA will file return with his correct data, not as per order. Please clarify.
Correct. See, what is happening is that he was served a notice under Section 46 asking him to submit the return within 15 days. He has not done it, and therefore the officer has proceeded for the assessment on the basis of non-filing of return. Now, as we all know that the assessment or the best judgment assessment cannot happen unless there are certain material evidences which are collected, or there is some material on records with the officer. It cannot be on the basis of a guesswork that the assessment can happen. But still, he has done the assessment, he has served the order. Then there is a provision which is specifying that कि अगर आप 30 दिन के अंदर वो रिटर्न दोबारा भर देते हो आप, if you are filing that return actually, then in that case your return will override this order, and therefore this order will be presumed to be withdrawn. Automatically वो withdraw हो जाएगा और आपका return के basis पे फिर assessment होगा. Yes, this is what the provision is all about.
Next question. As per proviso to Section 64 subclause 1 provides that a person in charge of goods shall be a taxable person in case if a taxable is not ascertainable, whether a recipient of goods who have made the payment to the supplier and claimed valid ITC be also considered as person in charge of goods, and department proceeds for recovery from the recipient.
See, first of all, we have to understand what is the purpose of summary assessment. It is not the best judgment assessment. It is the assessment when the department is feeling कि भाई आशु भाई तो भाग जाएंगे अगर अभी टैक्स की रिकवरी नहीं करी तो. आशु भाई एक ट्रक में पूरा सामान भर के ले जा रहे थे, रास्ते में उन्होंने उनको पकड़ लिया, तो वो पूरा का पूरा टैक्स की रिकवरी आशु से करेंगे, क्योंकि आशु ये बताने के लिए तैयार नहीं है कि ये सामान किसका और किससे लाए हैं. तो उस कंडीशन में इस प्रोविजो का मतलब ये है कि जिसका सामान है डिपार्टमेंट को पता नहीं चल पा रहा, आशु ट्रक लेके जा रहा है, वो बता ही नहीं रहा किसका सामान है, तो what will happen, I will be taken as a person liable to pay tax under section 64, that is the primary provision. बट उसके बाद प्रिकॉशंस हैं. प्रिकॉशंस क्या है कि अगर आप सुओ मोटो आगे आते हैं तो विद इन 30 डेज या कमिश्नर के पास पावर है कि आपको समरी असेसमेंट को जो है आपको वापस ले ले और सेक्शन 73 74 के अंदर असेसमेंट करें. तो व्हाट आई फील कि इट इज अ वेरी स्पेसिफिक प्रोविजन and has to be applied in very rare situations where the know about of the person who is supplying the goods or services is not available, or the person who is supplying goods or services, the department is of the fear will not be available in future. Though in those very rare situations these provisions can be applied. Even if these provisions are applied, there are powers with the commissioners, joint commissioner, I think with the additional commissioner and the joint commissioner, where they can withdraw this order and the normal proceeding under section 73 and 74 can be done. And when we go for 73 74, I think normal ITC claim and all things comes. But if we talk only for the order of the summary assessment, what I feel, department will not take the provisions of ITC when they are doing the summary assessment, because for that purpose you have the another opportunity available for the purpose of section 73 and 74. Avinash bhai?
Agreed. Absolutely. The purpose is to protect the interest of the revenue. Thankfully, the department is not taking action against this 64 or under the provisions of 64. They are only focusing on the provisional attachment. इसमें ले लग जाएंगे तो और ज़्यादा problem हो जाएगा. Yeah, next question, please.
Next question. Neither in section 65 clause 7 nor in section 66 clause 6 talks about refund of excess tax paid. If due to the findings of audit under section 65 or section 66, it comes to a knowledge of the department as well as the taxable person that tax had been excess paid, whether he can claim refund provided that the audit conducted is after 2 years or the relevant financial year.
See, I don't understand whether it is a directive or they are just pointing out something or discussing it. लेकिन जो मुझे समझ में आया वो ये आया कि there is no specific mentioning about the refund to be granted if after the audit the officer is of the belief that there was some excess tax paid. First and foremost, on a lighter mood, I would say that it rarely happens. ऐसा बहुत कम situation होगा जहाँ पे departmental officer will feel that there is an excess payment of tax, but still, nevertheless, let us believe that there was a situation. So, as per my belief, the department, when it comes out with an observation that the tax has been excess paid and you are eligible for refund, then I can claim the refund. I can certainly claim the refund. Now, if the question pertains to the relevant period for the purpose of calculation of 2 years, कि 2 साल के अंदर मुझे refund application करना है, तो whether this audit period will be excluded from this 2 period, if that is the question, then in that case we'll have to refer the provisions very strongly. और मेरे हिसाब से जहाँ पे भी ऐसा लगेगा वहाँ पे audit is generally conducted after 3 years or 2 years or 4 years or 5 years maybe. So उन situations में I will recommend, because मेरे हिसाब से relevant date is the question, whether the relevant date of 2 years or the calculation of 2 years will exclude this period or not. That is the question which I understand here. So मेरे हिसाब से even if after the audit the officer is observing that you are eligible for refund but you have not claimed, and the time limit as provided in the relevant period or relevant date under section 54 expires, then I'm afraid you will not be eligible for claiming that excess tax payment. I'm afraid, because this is not a assessment process. You cannot claim that 2 साल का period आपको ही ध्यान रखना पड़ेगा, and this period of audit will not be excluded from that calculation of 2 years. This is my view. Ashu bhai, if you can add something. Let me.
No, बिल्कुल सही भाई, मेरा भी ये मानना है कि refund आपका right है, but you have to claim it. Without claiming you will not get it, number one, and you have to claim within the stipulated time. Time is given under section 54(10) explanation, where explicitly time limits are given within 2 years, and the exclusion is only when something is disputed. Something is disputed because of appeal, something is disputed because you have to go on to the court, or department has gone to the court. In that case, those disputed period is excluded. When something is done in the audit, that is not the dispute. The department has come suo motu to you they found something has been paid in excess, and government तो बहुत बड़ी साहूकार है, जब तक आपका पैसा अपने आप थोड़ी देगी, आपको मांगना पड़ेगा within limited period. Limited period you will not get the money, that's very sure, what I feel.
Correct. सही है.
Next question. Sir, kindly elaborate provisions of section 24 clause 7, that is compulsory registration by an agent. Whether this provision is applicable to all types of commission agents or there's specific class of agents covered in it. If a person is only a commission agent and having aggregate turnover below the threshold under section 22 subsection 1, will he be required to get himself registered under section 24 clause 7?
See, basically what we have to see in this. First of all, section 24 is notwithstanding anything contained in section 22. That means अगर मैं section 24 में cover होता हूँ तो मेरे को विदाउट थ्रेशोल्ड लिमिट रजिस्ट्रेशन लेना पड़ेगा. दैट मीन्स मैं जो 20 लाख की लिमिट मेरे पास अवेलेबल है वो लिमिट मेरे को अवेलेबल नहीं होगी. उसमें जो एक कवर है वो है एजेंट. एजेंट की डेफिनेशन देखें तो बड़ी क्लियर है. अगर कोई किसी के दूसरे के बिहाफ पर काम कर रहा है तो दैट इज एजेंट. फैक्टर, ब्रोकर, कमीशन एजेंट, आड़तिया, व्हाटएवर नेम इट इज कॉल्ड. इसके एक सर्कुलर है 57/2017 और 18. उसमें उन्होंने एजेंट को डिफाइन किया हुआ है व्हाट इज मेंट बाय द एजेंट. अगर हम इस सर्कुलर की डेफिनेशन में जाएं तो एजेंट के लिए दो क्राइटेरिया होने इंपॉर्टेंट हैं. देखिए, जब हम एजेंट में जाते हैं तो दो चीजें इंपॉर्टेंट होती है. इफ आई एम मियरली ए फैसिलिटेटर देन आई एम नॉट द एजेंट. फॉर एग्जांपल, मैंने क्या किया, मैंने ए लिमिटेड को सामान चाहिए था, बी लिमिटेड को सामान सप्लाई करना था. ए लिमिटेड और बी लिमिटेड दोनों को मिलवा दिया, उन दोनों ने आपस में बिलिंग करी और मेरे को कमीशन दे दिया. So as per the circular 57 and as per the earlier precedent, it is very clear the person will not be the agent. He will be only facilitating the services between these two persons. Agent होने के लिए दो चीजें बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट है होने के लिए. Number one, he has facilitated the services of the goods and services between two persons and he has supplied the goods and services on behalf of other person. That means मैं अपने एग्जाम्पल को फिर से एक्सटेंड करता हूं. मान लीजिए ए लिमिटेड को 100 kg ऑफ कुछ सामान जो है, लेट्स से इट वाज अ गेहूं और इट वाज समथिंग एल्स, दाल कोई पल्स जो थी वो बेसिकली ए ने बी को बेची. ए से बी को मिलवाने का काम सी ने किया. ए ने अपना बिल बी को रेज किया डायरेक्टली, सी ने अपना कमीशन सीधा बी से ले लिया. इन दैट केस सी विल नॉट बी द कमीशन, विल नॉट बी द एजेंट पर से फॉर द डेफिनेशन ऑफ द जीएसटी लॉ. बट अगर वो जो सी है पूरे दाल की भी बिलिंग अपने इनवॉइस पर करता है प्लस अपना कमीशन चार्ज करता है, देन सी विल बी फॉलोइंग एज ए कमीशन एजेंट. तो व्हाट इज माय आंसर? नंबर वन, मैं जब कह रहा हूं कि कोई बंदा एजेंट है कि नहीं है, यू हैव टू सी as per the definition given the GST law and as per the circular 57 because department will be bound by that. अगर मैं एजेंट उस कैटेगरी में पढ़ूंगा तो सेक्शन 24 के अंदर विदाउट थ्रेशोल्ड लिमिट मेरे को रजिस्ट्रेशन लेना पड़ेगा. लेकिन अगर मैं डेफिनेशन एजेंट में नहीं पढ़ता हूं, मैं सिर्फ फैसिलिटेट कर रहा हूं सर्विसेज को, जहां पर गुड्स एंड सर्विसेज के दो सप्लायर और रिसिपिएंट को मिला रहा हूं, लेकिन उसके जो बीच की सप्लाई है गुड्स या सर्विसेज की वो मैं नहीं कर रहा हूं, तो आई विल नॉट बी एजेंट, आई विल नॉट बी कमीशन एजेंट एंड आई विल नॉट बी फॉलोइंग इनटू सेक्शन 24. So the important aspect will be to look into whether I am working in agent or not. If I am working in agent, then either it is a commission agent or some other agent. In that case, the registration will be without threshold limit. Otherwise, it will not be. Avinash bhai.
Agreed, absolutely.
Next question. As per section 62 does not provide for opportunity of being heard before passing order, does it mean the proper officer may initiate recovery proceedings against registered person with giving an opportunity of being heard?
See, first and foremost, there are two provisions. One is section 62, which deals with the provisions in case where the non-filers of returns are there. Now, whenever I say non-filers of returns, section 46 is first invoked, as we have discussed earlier also. कि 46 में notice तो उसको देना ही पड़ेगा and the time limit is there. Within 15 days you will have to file the return. उसके बावजूद भी नहीं देता, then this, as per me, will be deemed to be an opportunity which is already given. You have already given an opportunity, you have already sent a notice wherein you have asked the person to file the return, but still, even after giving that or even after doing that, he has not filed the return, meaning thereby now you can proceed after the opportunity has already been given. Now, so far as recovery proceedings are concerned, there is an option which is given to this person under subsection 2, wherein it is said कि अगर वो आप 30 दिन में ये order मिलेंगे, 30 दिन के अंदर अगर आप return file कर देते हैं, which you have not filed earlier, then in that case this order of best judgment will be automatically withdrawn. So पहला option तो आपके पास वो एक है, लेकिन फिर भी अगर आप 30 दिन में नहीं करते हैं, then in that case the recovery proceeding, I am afraid the recovery proceedings will be started, and there is no point in giving any opportunity of being heard to this person again. This is my view. Ashu bhai, anything to be added?
No, we can move forward.
Yeah.
Next question. If there is change in name of proprietor in PAN, that is middle name deleted, whether any GST amendment as code or non-code fields required, or it will automatically validate?
In that, first I have to determine whether the PAN number will be required to change in that way. I am not sure. If the PAN number is changed, then it will be new registration per se. If the PAN number is not changed, if we go to the section 28, for the purpose of the four fields have been given in the rule itself. I just read out what are the things there. Just I am bringing out the rules for that purpose. It is rule 19, basically amendment of the registration. When there is a legal name of the change of the business, that means पहले मेरा बिजनेस का नाम था अमित कुमार गोयल, अब नाम हो गया है अमित गोयल. I think this is the legal name change of the legal change in the legal name of the company or the firm or the proprietorship. I think it is a core field, and accordingly the change has to be done in. अविनाश भाई.
Certainly, तो उसमें validation का जरूरत पड़ेगा, automatically नहीं होगा. Correct?
Yes.
Next question. Whether interest on unsecured loan given is a taxable supply or an exempt supply? Please throw light on the exemption which, as per my view, exempts interest only of banking sector.
See, if I read the exemption notification as you have rightly mentioned, it is applicable only in case wherein the interest is from the financial institutions or the banking institutions. Now let us evaluate what is unsecured loan and what is the interest out of it. Will it constitute a supply per se? Because see, there are two ways of interpreting a exemption notification. One is कि अगर किसी को exemption दिया और बाकी लोगों को नहीं दिया तो by default it is taxable. This is one way of interpreting it. And the other way is whether this unsecured loan which was given by you is constituting a business for you. If it is constituting a business of providing loans to other persons, then certainly you will fall within the four corners of that particular exemption notification, and interest will be exempted. If it is not a business, then it is not a supply. If it is not a supply, then there is no question of taxability. So in my view, in my humble view, interest on loan per se is exempt, meaning thereby any person who is engaged into the business of financing or business of providing the finance to someone else, and any interest is being charged by that person, it is exempt by virtue of 12/2017 notification. Or uske alawa, I don't feel any unsecured loan or any loan which is given wherein it will constitute a supply. So therefore there will be no question of taxability for interest under GST law. This is my view. Ashu bhai can add something to this, and then we'll move to the last question.
Because I will take another dimension of it.
Yeah, please.
Because there are two of loans. One is I am into the business of giving loan, like banking sector or NBFC. They are giving the loan, that interest is 100%, no doubt about it. But let's say I am supplying the laptops. My main business is supplying the laptop, and for that purpose I give the loan to. Suppose though it is not possible, let's say take one example. A Limited is in the business of supplying the laptop. A is providing a laptop to its customers, and whereby the A is also facilitating कि आप मेरे से लोन ले लो और उसके अगेंस्ट आप इंस्टॉलमेंट में पैसे मेरे को देते जाना.
Correct.
जब वो इंस्टॉलमेंट में पैसे देंगे तो उसके अगेंस्ट वो इंटरेस्ट भी चार्ज करेंगे. In my humble opinion, they are charging the interest on that loan. That is for the purpose of supply of laptop,
Correct.
not for the purpose of supply of loan. In that case, that interest will be added into the value of that laptop.
Correct. Value
So
of supply
I
will
think
be.
what is the underlying factor we have to keep in mind? What is the underlying transaction for which the interest is being paid? If the underlying transaction is itself exempted, then interest cannot be made taxable. But if the underlying transaction is taxable for which the loan is given and interest is charged, in my humble opinion, that becomes the supply part of the main component, and that will be charged to taxable accordingly.
So certainly I will agree with this, because it will fall into 15(2)(d) and it will be added to the value of supply.
Yes.
Correct? Correct.
Yes.
Correct. So I think the time is already over, but let us take this last question and have the view of Ashubhai, and then we'll stop.
Okay. The MD of the company will undergo MBA residential training at business school, and the fees is rupees 40 lakhs. Can the company avail ITC if this amount is considered as perquisites and added to its salary? And if the training fees is not added to its perquisites, then what will happen?
See, first, what we have to understand, there are three parties involved: MBA Institute, company, and the MD. Because the agreement to pay fees is between the MBA Institute and the company, that is the one set of agreement. The second set of services are from the company to the MD, whereby they are providing the additional services to the MD by where they are taking the education for the purpose, for any purpose. Number one, first we take the transaction between MD and the company, whereby the company is providing the services to the MD. In that case, what I feel, if it is not the salary, if it is not the part of the salary, it will become taxable. The reason being, thus, if we go for the schedule 1, what is not the supply, when the services are being provided from employee to employer, services from employer to employee is not covered there. So that means whenever the facilitation for the of the education is done for the purpose of MD, that is the services from company to the MD, and if it is not part of the salary, that becomes a taxable. That is the first part, what I feel. The second part, when we take the services between the company and the company and for the purpose of the MBA Institute, for that purpose, what I have to see, for what purpose I will be using that ITC. आउटपुट मैं जो इनपुट सप्लाई ले रहा हूं, वो मैं टैक्सेबल सप्लाई के लिए यूज करूंगा, एग्जम्प्टेड सप्लाई के लिए यूज करूंगा, या किस चीज के लिए करूंगा? तो अगर मैं उसको सैलरी का पार्ट लेके चलता हूं, अगर मैं जो सैलरी दे रहा हूं अपने एमडी को और जो पढ़ाई के लिए पेमेंट कर रहा हूं वो सैलरी का पार्ट है, इन दैट केस that is not taxable at all, that is not the supply, so that credit will not be available if you go as per section 17. नंबर 2, अगर वो सैलरी का पार्ट नहीं है और मैं टैक्सेबल लेके चल रहा हूं, मैं जो एम्प्लॉय को यानी अपने एमडी को जो सर्विस दे रहा हूं वो टैक्सेबल है, तो उसके अगेंस्ट आईटीसी सब्जेक्ट टू सेक्शन 16 will be available. That is my humble opinion. अविनाश भाई.
Agreed, absolutely, I agree with this. So I think now we should, because the time is already over, so I would like to thank the participants and the entire team for compiling these queries, because we are receiving, Ashubhai, you will be surprised to know that we have received almost, up till now, I think almost 2000 queries, 2000 plus queries, and we are willing to compile the entire queries once and then provide it to the participants. So we are expecting that by the time we complete this course, we'll be having around 3000 to 4000 queries, which can be a very handy compilation for the GST compliances. So this series or this course can prove to be very useful to all the participants and rest of the persons also in the country, that the queries and the very practical queries are being asked and it can be used by everyone. So let me thank the entire team for the wonderful work they are doing, and day in day out they are working so hard, like compiling all the queries, maintaining a series of 31 days, and second series we have announced from tomorrow that we'll be starting a case law analysis series. So wonderful work by the entire team. I'm thankful to each one of you. I'm thankful to the participants, all the participants, and at last but not the least, I would like to thank Ashubhai for sparing his time and making this query session very live and useful for all the participants, and giving a new perspective and adding to the perspective of all the participants. I'm really thankful to each one of you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Bye. Bye.
Bye bye.